Today, I'm going to teach you how to take your furniture from this to this. Welcome back to The Broken Masterpiece with Kristen. Hi, so welcome back. We're going to get started today on this buffet. I flipped the last one in 30 hours, so let's see what I can do with this. But this one's going to be a little bit different because this has a laminate top. And so as you can see from the pictures on this, it's super scratched up, but the laminate's in really good shape. But the glossy on top's a little scratched up. So we're gonna see how we can get through this, and I wanna give it a stained look. I want to paint this a different color. I wanna use green, so this is called Cactus by Dixie Belle. And then we're gonna go through, we're gonna give it just a light shading of dark in all the grooves, and we're gonna bring these legs to a different stain. So follow along. I'm gonna be hand painting this piece so that if you don't have a sprayer, a lot of beginners don't, and even professionals, some professionals prefer to use hand painting. So follow along, it's gonna be fun. When I saw this piece in my local furniture depot, I knew I had to have it because I loved the shape and the style. But the top was really confusing for me as I don't work with laminate, and I couldn't tell if it was a veneer or laminate. The paint job on this piece was confusing too. It was very gritty. It was almost like they made their own chalk paint, so I knew I was going to definitely have to do some sanding work. So if your piece is like this at all, get to town, you're going to clean it first, and then you're going to get to town sanding. When I'm sanding pieces like this, I like to start with a 120 grit and make sure it's not too sharp. And if it is too much and it's causing too many scratch marks in the paint, I move up to a 150 or a 180 grit. My goal on this piece is not to have to sand all the paint off or strip all the paint off. It's just to get it smooth enough to get my primer on so that I can paint over it. This is called Premium Stripper by Clean Strip. Now, I hate using chemical strippers like this because you got to wear gloves up to your elbows, but I still had to run back to the sink to get a drip spot that got on my elbow or my leg at different points. And so you just want to be really careful when you're working with a stripper like this. I tested a few spots on the piece to see how well it would strip and how long I would need to leave it on there. And this is the first spot I tested without sanding it before. You can see it start to work because you start to see the bubbling up. It came off pretty well, but not completely well, so I knew that I needed to leave it on longer when I did the rest of the piece. Now the crazy part about this is I'm using Afterwash. It's sold right next to the stripper at Lowe's or Home Depot to scrub with steel wool the rest of the finish that's coming off. And guess what? It started taking off the printed wood marks. And so as it looks like wood, it's just printed on there. But there is wood underneath, so it's so interesting. It just doesn't have all the grain that was shown through the laminate printing. While the stripper's sitting on the top, I went to town on the rest of the body with my square sander with 150 grit. I tri-fold my sandpaper, especially when I'm hand sanding, and I could get my square sander on part of the drawer, but part of it I really did have to do by hand, so I wasn't taking off too much as it was pretty soft wood. Okay, so if you're working on legs like this, it is really awesome to use an electric sander, but if you don't have one, that's okay. You can still hand sand it. Now I'm using a 120 because this was pretty thick down here. Now I could have used stripper and I did on part of it, but I'm just using that sandpaper with a 120 and then a 150 grit, and I'm going over it as hard as I can with gloves on so that you don't lose your fingertips. The stripper had sat for about 30 minutes, and so it was ready for me to strip. It came off much easier because I left it a little bit longer, and that's why it's good to do a test spot just to see really what the type of finish you're using is going to take. Through these curves right here, I did use some stripper on there, and then I used my steel wool with the afterwash and I went through it. Steel wool acts as a sandpaper, so it's so fantastic to work with. Once you get done stripping and sanding everything down, you're going to clean it again with a TSP or anything that's like a degreaser. So TSP, you can actually buy it already mixed up at Lowe's or Home Depot, or you can buy the powder and mix it up in warm water in a spray bottle. My key for working quickly is to have these microfiber rags and have a lot of them, and I wipe everything down dry so that it can dry much quicker so I can get to work. The primer that I chose to use on this piece is by Kills and it's called Clear. The brush makes all the difference, and I'm using one of Zebra's brush. It's the chiseled brush, and I'm going over it. I'm getting it all across the piece, as you'll see, and then I'm going back over it with really light strokes so that I can try and get minimal brush marks in my primer. When you're hand painting like this, you want to go from the edges and pull up almost in the middle. And so this is how you want to end with no brush marks or end with not messy details, is you want to go from the edge and just slightly lift up as soon as you get to the center, or go all the way across if you can lightly lift up at the end. While the primer is drying, here's what I'm using for the top. So I'm using my angled brush, I'm using Gel Stains by Lily Moon, and my spray bottle. So you're going to want to mist the entire top, get it wet, and then you're going to put your stain on in whatever pattern you want. It does not matter, but don't use too much. I used a little bit too much, so as you can see, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add the excess to the feet. I did a custom blend of stains because I had a few left over, but it's a blend of Wooden Barrel Natural Cork and White Oak. Once you get the stain all mixed up on the top, you're going to go back over it. You're going to cover the surface first, but then you're going to go back over it in long strokes and then get the edges. Let it sit on for a few minutes, and then you can start the wiping off process. You can use shop cloths for this. I'm using paper towels because I ran out of my shop cloths, but I'm taking the excess from the top and I'm going through and I'm wiping it down on the legs. It's a great way to reuse that paint or the stain and make sure that you don't waste any. You're going to go through the entire top and make sure you get all the excess off, make sure there's no streak marks, and make sure you get the edges. Now, if your paint or your primer has a lot of brush marks through it, you're going to want to go through with a 220 grit and you're going to sand your primer and then you're going to wipe it clean. Thankfully mine didn't, and so I'm going to get to town. I'm using a mister bottle, and I have a video detailing more of this process that I'm going to link up above. But just to show you right here, I'm going through the same process with a triangle brush where I mist my surface and I get it pretty wet when I'm hand painting. And then I go through with my Dixie Belle paint and I'm going to do nice long swipes, really. And then I'm going to go back over it. As long as your last touches to the paint are really soft touches and you're ending pulling up gently, then you're going to have a really smooth finish. It's going to look professionally sprayed. But keeping that surface and that paint wet or moist is going to make all the difference in the world. It's going to be really easy to work with that paint. It's the same process for the sides and the front and the inside of that cabinet. You're going to wet the surface down with the mister bottle. You're going to go through with your paint. You're going to get enough paint, but you're going to make sure that it's easy to work with. If you feel the brush pulling at all, your surface is not wet enough, you need to go through and spray it again, and then go over every single brush stroke with a really soft touch at the end. The paint should dry in about an hour, and you're going to go back over it with a second coat, and a second coat is really all you need here. And so I'm doing the same process. If I need to sand it down at all, I will, but pretty much you can go ahead and put your second coat on after you've misted the surface and work with the same paint in the same way. Once that paint is dry, I'm going to go through with my top coat. Now I'm using Stellar Shield by Lily Moon. This paint actually by Dixie Belle has a top coat in it, but I don't trust that completely. And so I always use extra protection when I'm selling a piece or sending it home with a client to make sure that I put an extra layer of top coat on it for durability. Now because the gel stain I used is water-based and the paint is all water-based, I can use that Stellar Shield on the entire thing. So I'm going through and I'm sealing everything right now. That top probably needs 2 to 3 layers of seal coat, especially as this is a buffet or dresser and stuff's going to be set on top of it. I'm just getting it on, but then you'll notice that my last strokes on this are all the way across and I lift up right when I get to that edge. While it's drying, I painted the handles that came with this piece in a metallic gold by Rust-Oleum, and then I put it out on my driveway. I got some great pictures of it. I put it through an app called Photo Room. It's actually an AI app that helps you create a scene for your piece, so I didn't have to stage this one. I put it through the app, and then I posted it to Facebook Marketplace in all of its glory. I'll get some of those photos for you. If you like this video and want to go more in depth on the hand painting, you're going to want to click on this next video. Thank you guys for joining me, and post a comment below if you love this video.